I'm going to talk about two artworks in this lecture. One is from the Middle Empire, and then the last one is from the Late Empire. The first one we're going to talk about is the Column of Trajan. It was built in Rome between 113 and 116 CE. It's about 125 feet, including the base, tall, and it still stands today. And what it depicts is a spiral frieze of Trajan's campaign in Dacia. And Trajan is one of the emperors of Rome. And Dacia is in modern-day Romania. Now originally, you see this statue up here, that would have been a statue of Trajan. But today it is a statue of St. Peter that was added during the early Renaissance. The column depicts imagery in bas relief, or low relief. Now the scenes are very packed, and here's some up-close images of it so you can see a little bit better. But the scenes are very densely packed. There are more than 2,500 figures. And so if this entire column had been rolled out, like the frieze had been rolled out, it would be about 656 feet long. Now when you look at it, especially today, it is almost impossible to read. It would have originally been painted, and so that would have helped with the way that you kind of can look at it and read what's going on. The scenes are also repetitive. So what that means is that, I'm going to go back to this image. If you're standing right here, say you're standing right here, and you're looking up at this column, or if you're standing over here and you're looking up at it from this angle, it's going to be the same story. It's going to be the same images, so it repeats itself. So that no matter what angle you stand when you're looking at this column, you see the exact same story. Now the story is of a recent campaign of Dacia, and it does include several portraits of Trajan and some other important individuals. The other figures depicted here are soldiers, barbarians, barbarian captives, and trumpeters. The figures are connected through the landscape, architecture, and the reoccurring figure of Trajan. So this kind of unites the composition. Now the registers at the top, so these registers at the top, are actually bigger. So at the bottom it starts at about 3 feet. The registers are about 3 feet, and when you get to the top they get bigger to 4 feet, so that it helps you read it. Now originally in here would have been Trajan's ashes there at the base. So it's the story of this campaign. So we have different things going on. We have Trajan's army crossing the Danube River on a bridge that they built of boats. So let's see, you can maybe see that right here. Let's see, I think I have here's a better angle of it. So here's this bridge that they built of boats. And here is the personification of the Danube River. And so they crossed this river to begin their campaign. The column is, of course, an example of imperial propaganda. It is meant to promote the image of Trajan as strong, as stable, and an efficient commander of a well-run army. So they have a problem, like this is actually to show Roman innovation. So they have a problem. There's no bridge and they need to cross the Danube River. What do? They build a bridge. They use their boats to build a bridge. The Romans were actually known for their engineering techniques, like to build bridges and roads. Very quickly, they would have their army engineers take care of that for them. And this was actually one of the innovations of the Romans, to have like an engineering unit for their army. Now their military might, of course, is also shown, because we have to see Trajan bringing home some of the spoils of war. And of course, they're bringing these riches home to Rome. We also see, sometimes we see different depictions of so here's just another image where you can see the Romans crossing the ocean, or the river in boats. And over here, it's very chaotic. And I think that's actually an interesting depiction, because that's, of course, how warfare is, very chaotic. But it is a very crowded image. Here is actually an image of Trajan himself, right here. And then here are some images of the barbarians, who, of course, are the native Dacians. And sometimes they are depicted as chaotic and scared, and sort of like they're retreating and they're panicking. And then other times they're depicted as more nobly. But of course they always have this bushy hair and bushy beards to separate them from the more clean-cut Romans. So here are the more clean-cut Romans. They do have beards, but they have, tighter haircuts and stuff. And then over here we have some of the Dacians actually welcoming the Romans, some of the older people and the young children welcoming the Romans. So they're depicted as chaotic, but then sometimes they're also depicted as fierce and worthy of, the Romans' efforts. Now this is actually a hollow tower or column. So originally you could have climbed up it. I don't think you can anymore though. So again, it's a depiction of Roman propaganda. It's showing how awesome and how innovative they are, and also how much even their enemies end up loving them. And it's also depicting the other, who are these Dacians. The Middle to Late Empire was marked by chaos and political and economic decline. Barbarian groups pressed on Rome's frontiers and crossed into borders, disrupting provincial governments. Eventually, the army came to control the government, and imperial guards were set up and deposed rulers almost at will. There was lots of chaos and lots of successions during this period. And I put this image up here. I believe it's in your book, and it is depicting one of the rather poor rulers of Rome that ruled right before this period. Diocletian came to power in 284 CE. He was a brilliant general and politician. He reversed the empire's declining fortunes and initiated an increasingly autocratic form of rule. The social structure under his rule became very rigid. So we have very rich people and very poor people. So this is going to create problems as well. Eventually, Diocletian is going to divide the empire into two. And he is going to rule the east part of the empire. And Maximin is going to rule the west. Now, the whole thing is that they've gone through this era where, an emperor has died and there's all this chaos of succession and stuff like that. And so they're trying to avoid this. So they're supposed to have set up successors before they die or retire, so that when they did die or retire, their succession would not cause chaos. Well, this doesn't work. When Diocletian and Maximin died, the struggle for power began. And there's two contenders for Maximin's Western Empire. One is the son of Maximin, who is Maxentinus, and the other is Constantine I, who was the son of a tetrarch. And a tetrarch you can read about in your book, but basically a tetrarch is one of the four cult emperors that was set up by Diocletian to rule. It didn't last very long. Constantine eventually wins in 312. Now, Constantine is famous, is one of the more famous Roman emperors because he is connected to Christianity. And he is known as the first Christian emperor, although he probably wasn't fully Christian. We think his mother was Christian, and he did issue, along with the ruler of the East, the Edict of Milan, which established religious tolerance for all religious groups. And that's really important to the Christian cause. Constantine was also the chief Roman priest, and he was devoted to Roman gods, particularly the god of that favored the military, and a manifestation of Helios Apollo, the sun god. In 324, Constantine defeated the ruler of the East, and he became the sole ruler of the empire. So he basically reunites the empire until his death. But he does something that really shocks and appalls and also disrupts the empire. He moves the capital of the Roman Empire to Byzantium. So just to show you on a map, here is Rome, the capital of the empire. And then over here is Byzantium, which he actually renames Constantinople. So this is a really big deal. Rome is no longer the seat of the government, and it declines in importance. Now, it's still a big city, and it wanted to be in charge. And one of the things that it does is it wants to say, yeah, maybe the emperor isn't living here anymore, but he is still part of the city. We're still important. So they build monuments to Constantine. This is the Arch of Constantine, which was built from 312 to 315. And it's actually built next to the Colosseum. If you look over here, you can actually see the Colosseum peeping through there. It is a triumphal arch. And remember, a triumphal arch is a distinctive Roman structure. It's part architecture, part sculpture, and it's freestanding. And remember that triumphal arches would commemorate a victory celebration during which victorious generals or emperors would parade his troops, captive spoils of war, through the city after a significant campaign. Here's an illustration that shows us how a triumphal arch could be used. And also, if you look closely in the Arch of Titus, you can see a triumphal arch depicted, and they're parading through it. The Arch of Titus is a huge triple arch, and it was erected by the Senate. It's a memorial to Constantine's victory over Maximinus for the sole seat of Roman emperor. It is a 3-barrel vaulted passageway, flanked by columns on high pedestals. The upper level has elaborate sculptural decoration and an inscription. And the inscription basically says this is for Constantine from the Senate and the Roman people. It has several reliefs on this arch, and you can see that it's covered in reliefs. And some of these reliefs are actually looted from earlier monuments. These monuments had been dedicated to Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius. So they were basically recycling these artworks and putting them on their monument. Now, why do that? Maybe they were just lazy and they didn't want to make any more sculptures, or maybe they didn't have the money. But an argument can be made that they wanted to visually transfer the old Roman virtues of strength, courage, piety, and the history of Rome connected through these great emperors to modern times, to Constantine. So basically they wanted to recall the Roman past here on Constantine Arch. And I think that's a way that they were trying to still remain important to Constantine and to the empire. Flanking the inscription over the central arch are relief panels taken from a monument to victory for Marcus Aurelius. And attached to these piers are sculptures of prisoners made to celebrate Trajan's victory over Dacia in the early 2nd century. We also have a group of roundels that were taken from a monument of Hadrian, and they were modified when they were put on Constantine's arch. So these originally would have depicted Hadrian, but they actually knocked off Hadrian's head and replaced it with Constantine. The themes of both the north side and the south side roundels are the hunt. So on the north side we have the hunt for the boar, the sacrifice of Apollo, lion hunt, and the sacrifice to Hercules. On the south side we have a departure for the hunt, a sacrifice to the god of the hunt, a hunt for a bear, and a sacrifice to Diana, who is the goddess of the hunt. The hunt actually serves as a metaphor for warfare, so that's why we have the hunt depicted here on this arch. There were actually new reliefs depicted or created for this structure, and here's an example of these new reliefs. And it's actually a different kind of art style. The reliefs show a change in style or approach and subject matter. It's different from the other reliefs. So if we compare them, we see squat figures here, and we see these nice, beautiful, classical, elongated figures here. This is a specific message, and basically this sets the tone for art in the next period, and that's that the message is more important than the representation. So sure, fine, we'll have these squat figures, that's okay. The representation isn't as important as the actual message, and that will really be very important in the Christian period. The Arch of Constantine bridges the arts of the classic world and the art of the Middle Ages.